So how many of y'all know somebody like that? If you know me, you know somebody like that. Because I've been accused of a bubble. How many of y'all are already on Amazon looking to go buy a bubble? Looks like a little bit of fun. Hey, if you're taking notes, I want you to write something. Even if you're not taking notes, I want you to write this down. This isn't in your notes. This actually goes probably more towards what we're going to talk about next week, but just felt like it was on my mind. I want to share it this morning. You cannot heal what you don't feel. I didn't come up with that. Somebody said it, but that's been on my mind all week. Because that's kind of where I'm living right now in my bubble. But you can't heal what you can't feel. Numbness is not healing. Numbness doesn't mean you're over it. Being numb to it doesn't mean that you have resolved it. Can't heal what you can't feel. But a lot of us, I know, learned from a very early age that showing our emotions made us weak. We even learned to hide our emotions from ourselves. But hiding your feelings isn't a sign of strength. And the Bible, even Jesus had a lot to say about this. God created us with these feelings and emotions for a reason. And if we want to grow, we got to stop saying things like it's all good and it's fine when it's not. I'm okay when I'm not. And start being honest with ourselves, with others, about what's really going on inside. So over the next few weeks to kick off this year, we're going to be talking about our thoughts and our feelings, which makes some of y'all squirm already. I know you're looking for the door. I don't want to go there, but we're going to talk about mastering our emotions, which especially you guys, and this is kind of stereotypical because I know it's not just us men. Some of you women are good at masking this stuff too, but us guys especially, I've noticed that we get permission to get angry, and we have permission to be silly, right? That's how we cope. That's how we deal. We can get angry because that's manly for whatever reason we think, or we can just joke our way, silly our way through. And that's been me all my life. That was my dad. That's how I learned to do it. Some of you women do that too. That's how we learn to deal. But any other emotion, for whatever reason, we see as a sign of weakness. If I admit that I'm lonely, or I've been hurt, or I'm sad, somebody's going to tell me, grow up, right? Suck it up, Dennis. Be a man. Be a grown-up. Get over it. Move on. But it takes a strong man. It takes a strong woman to be able to look deeper into what they're actually feeling, the way God created them to feel about certain things, than to always just say, I'm fine. It's good. It's all good. Don't worry about me. I'll be all right, when we know it's not. So we're going to start today just by laying a foundation. I want to look at a guy who was a stereotypical man's man in my book, but it was a guy who also had a sensitive side, especially toward the end of his life as he matured. If anybody won the battle in their mind, I think it was the Apostle Paul. He learned how to master his emotions. He could at the end of his life say it's all good, but he could say it from a different perspective, a different plane. And the encouraging thing for me, though, is when I look at the life of Paul, he wasn't always there. In fact, if you go read like some of the early letters we have in our New Testament, a lot of the letters he wrote to the churches, you look at some of the first that he wrote when he wasn't as mature, honestly, sometimes Paul seemed to come across a little frazzled. Paul had some ego issues when he got compared to other preachers, right? Paul felt like he was disjointed sometimes, angry even. And that's encouraging to me in a way because oftentimes I battle with my emotions and my behaviors too. So it gives me hope. He battled. Like how many of us can identify with something he said when he just admitted the things that I want to do, I don't do, right? And here's the things I don't want to do, and I end up doing them anyway. Anybody relate to that? I mean, that was Paul. I mean, that's me half the time, right? Just like I make these goals and they fall short and I'm just a loser again. And so he asked, why does that happen? Who can help me? Why am I such a bonehead? He didn't call himself a bonehead. He called himself a wretched man. It was a little more spiritual. But for me, it's a bonehead. Why are you doing this again and again and again? Even Paul battled in the heart and the mind. But he won. He took back ground. And over time, he learned to master those feelings, those emotions, even when all life was stacked against him. He's writing from jail cells, not even sure if he's going to live through the night. He could say things and write things that seemed like this guy's just on a whole different level emotionally in the way that he balances his life. And so I want to look at one of the things he wrote to the Corinthians, 2 Corinthians chapter 10. He said this. He said, for though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. And he's talking about a spiritual war, actually a war of the mind, a battle of the mind here. Because he says the weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. And two really cool words in this verse. One of them is the word power. It actually comes from a Greek word dunamis. It's where we get our word dynamite from, dunamis. You kind of hear that in there. And that's literally what the power is, this explosive type of a power of God that he says we have. And the mighty weapons we fight with have that kind of explosive power to do what? He says to knock down, to demolish strongholds. And he's talking about strongholds in our mind, not just physical strongholds, but thinking strongholds. So what is a stronghold? Okay, it's not a word you probably use a lot. I don't remember if you've used the word stronghold, you were probably watching wrestling or MMA fighting or something, right? Stronghold. But this comes from a Greek word that means a fortified prison. That's what he's talking about. Like you're behind bars, literally in your mind. You're a prisoner locked in by deception, by lies. It's a stronghold. You've learned to live your life out of all of that negative junk that's put you into this prison. And then our enemy comes along. We have a spiritual enemy that loves to just take what's already in there and just one lie at a time, continue feeding that. It becomes our filter. It becomes the way we act out in life so that we're in this prison constantly believing and acting on things that aren't true at all. Negative beliefs that you battle with, right? Think about it. I can't trust people. Well, where did that come from, right? I can't let them know the real me. If they really knew me, they wouldn't like me. You know, God must not even really love me. Even if God is even there, I'm never going to get over that. How could I ever forgive that person? How could they ever forgive me? I'm unlovable. I'm worthless. I don't have what it takes. All these negative things we live our lives out of. So Paul, who experienced a lot of this for himself, he says we can learn a process of how to knock down, blow through, get beyond, demolish, obliterate these strongholds of our negative beliefs in our mind. And so he says in verse 5, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. So arguments, knowledge. He's talking about what goes on in the mind, in our heart. Anything that's not from God, we can identify it. We can call it out. We can name it. Then we can crush it. We demolish everything that's not in line with the truth that God speaks over us. And then what? And I love this. He says we take captive. I mean, isn't that a cool shift? It just hit me even in the first service that before he's talking about we're prisoners, right? Now all of a sudden we're taking captive the thoughts that kept us in prison. The shift, we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. So how do we do that? How do we turn this around? So over the next few weeks, we're going to learn how to do this, how to recognize, first of all, what is a thought that's not from God? What is the truth? And then what does it mean to capture that thought and make it obedient to Christ? Okay, that sounds really good, but what does that even mean practically? And why does that even matter? Well, here's the main thing I want you to get this morning, all right? The life that you live, where you find yourself right now, the good, the bad, whatever. You find yourself in life where your thoughts have led you. The life you have is created by the thoughts you think. It's a process. It kind of looks like this, all right? Your thoughts come out of all kinds of core beliefs that you developed maybe as a young person, maybe before you could even speak. Your brain was already forming, like, how do I feel safe? What do I believe about the world? So you have this worldview that triggers thoughts. When things happen, you have an automatic filter it goes through, which causes you to feel certain things. Nothing wrong with feeling any of those feelings. God created you to feel, and then you act out of the feeling. And more times than not, we act out of feelings more than we act out of thoughts. That's why this is important, because your thoughts always lead you to your behaviors, your life. And the Bible teaches this principle constantly throughout. Such as Proverbs 23:7, it says, "For as a man thinks within himself, so is he." You know, what comes into the heart through the mind comes out into your life. Out of the heart flow the issues of life, it says in another place. As you think, so you become. So if you think you can't, I'm not worth it, I'm not capable, I'm not able, guess what? You won't. You just won't. If you believe that you're a constant victim, always suffering at the hand of outside circumstances, you're never going to take risk. You're always going to be a victim. You can't always choose the pain, somebody said, but you can choose whether you're going to continue to suffer or not. You know, if you're always looking at the problems, you're always ruminating on the problems, ruminating over your past, your failures that you can't change, or constantly ruminating, thinking about the future that you can't control and worrying about it. If you're doing all of that, problems are going to overwhelm you. You're never going to get unstuck, it feels like. But if instead, okay, I'm using my feelings to help look for solutions. I'm not going to direct my anger at people. I'm going to direct it at the problem that's making me angry, right? Look for the purposes of God in my life story. You'll find what you're looking for. You'll find solutions. You'll find God's working in and through you. But most of life's battles, listen, most of life's battles are fought and won or lost in the mind. The mind is a battlefield. Not like love is a battlefield, children of the 80s, right? Thank you, Pat Benatar. That's true, too. Love is a battlefield. But the mind is most definitely a battlefield. You think about what you think about. Think about what you think about. Your life, out of your life, the direction of your life goes in the direction of your strongest thoughts. So what comes into your mind comes out, no matter what you do. Listen, no matter where you go, no matter what you lay your hands to, no matter what you know, no matter what you buy, no matter where you go, where you live, you cannot have a positive life if you are at the mercy of negative thoughts. Can't do it. It just won't happen that way. Your thoughts matter. That's why the Bible talks about this a lot. So let me ask, okay, as you think about what you think about, are you excited? Do you get motivated? Do you get encouraged by those thoughts? Are you encouraged the direction that your thoughts are taking your life? Think about it. Think about what you think about. If our life is constantly moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts, are you satisfied? Are you fulfilled? Do you feel blessed? Are you encouraged by the direction that your thought life is taking you? Now, for me, if I can be transparent with you, for a lot of seasons of my life, if you ask me this, the question would be no. I'm scared. I'm fearful. I'm anxious. Like I could get up here and teach for a half hour or so, and I can mask it sometimes and come across all positive and faith-filled up here. The problem is a lot of times if I'm not careful leading up to Sunday morning, the days leading up to this, are so often my thoughts are just like whack. They're out there. It's all, during seasons of change especially, like we're going through in a lot of ways right now. There can really be a battle for me. My thoughts will be like, okay, last week I got some good comments. Maybe that was good, but there's no way I can keep this up, right? That must have been a fluke. They don't really know me either. I'm a fake. This message isn't going to be any good this week. I don't even know why people come here, right? I wouldn't come here to listen to me speak. I don't think I'd even go to this church if they had to listen to me. I'm exhausted. I'm overwhelmed. I can't do it all, right? I don't know how long I can keep doing this. This is so difficult. Nobody knows what I go through. This is so difficult. Poor me. And then afterwards, if I can get through all of that and I get up here and I do my thing, it's like, that was bunk, which is why I don't like video, why I don't like audio, because there's some southern woman on the other end of that that's talking. That's not me, and I hate everything about that. And, dude, I was like, that's the best you have? It's over, man. You need to find a new line of work. There's no reason. And my mind just racing. And when I role play that back, I'll go listen to this later on, too. There's a lot of me in that, isn't there? Like, I'm down on me, but I like me some me. And so I'm all worried about me, and it's me, I. And in my thoughts, my life is meant to be bigger than me. So I've been working on this. I've been trying to continually do something about it. And so this is what I want to talk to you about over the upcoming weeks. I can't overstress how important this is. Your life is moving in the direction of your thoughts and your feelings, and there's a battle. Almost every battle you face, if it's your marriage or relationships, right? The relationship you have is the result of the thoughts you have about yourself and other people. Your financial situation is often the result of your mindset about things, about stuff, about generosity, about why you have what you have. Maybe some people buy things like a drug because it feels good, or some people hoard things because they want security. But you don't trust God with it either way. The lack of joy or the lack of real gladness in your life, right? You look for happiness, but you're really not glad. It's based on what you think about life, what you're focused on, what you believe about you. So as a foundation this morning, I just want to give you two really simple things to take home, maybe chew on a little bit, to work on, consider this week. And then we're really going to get practical with this in the next couple of weeks. I want you to come back, bring somebody with you. But the first thing I want to encourage you to do this morning is just simply work to identify. And this can be a real hard step too, but name it. Identify the negative thought that's holding you back. What is it? What is the lie? What's the stronghold? That negative thought's a stronghold. And what's a stronghold again? It's a prison. It's a prison locked by lies, by deception. What is it? What's deceiving you? What's the lie? What's the negative thought that's keeping you from living the bigger life God wants you to live? And it may be just like with me. When I get going, I can hear them own negative self-talk, right? Like, I'm never going to be good enough. My past is too bad. Like, if they knew, there's no way. After all I've done, I'm useless. I'm ruined. I've peaked. I can't trust anybody. I can't get close to anybody. Everybody's always leaving me. I'm never going to get the job I want. I'm never going to do what I love. I'm always going to be behind. I'm never going to have enough, right? I'm going to end up broken alone. All my relationships, no matter how hard I try. Wow, what's the number one stronghold? What is it? Be honest about it. It can be a really difficult thing, so we don't want to own it. But what is it? What happens, and why is that important? Well, whenever you have that thought, your brain, it's wonderful how God has made our brains. One of the most ancient things on the planet is our brain, and our technology still can't keep up with how it's wired. Because every time you have a thought, your brain is literally rewiring itself. Just like a computer, right? There's even chemicals that go to work in your brain. There's this chemical makeup of the brain. Every single thought you have triggers chemicals. It's weird. But in our body, like if you think a negative thought, your body, feels that, files that away somewhere, right, to protect you later on. Some hurts can be so hard that your body locks it away so deep that you don't even know what it is, but you still live your life out of it. But if you have a positive thought, and this is where it gets dangerous too, something feels good, your body rewards you with this little chemical drug our body makes called dopamine. Anybody heard of dopamine? We love some dopamine, right? We'll do anything to get dopamine. That's why we say that's dope. I don't say it because I sound stupid when I say it. Brian, some cool people can say it, right? That's dope. But that's where we get it from. It's dopamine. It gives you this little legal buzz, this little quick hit, a thrill. You know that feeling, right? You get some good news, boop, little drop of dopamine. Man, I like that. And your brain records that too. It's kind of like, wait, what just happened? Because I like that. Let's do that again because I want that feeling again. And it records it and it puts it in the memory, and somebody says, ooh, you're looking good today. Boop, little chemical hit. Oh, I like that. I need to make sure I look good tomorrow, right? Somebody makes a little positive comment on your Instagram. Boop, oh, dopamine. I got to make sure my image is right then, right? Because I like that. It's your brain saying that. What do you think about that, all right? Let's think it again. What happens is, okay, the more you seek those experiences that make you feel good, give you that little hit, you're creating what scientists will call a neural pathway in your brain. Your brain literally has wired itself now around what feels good, and it goes seeking that. Why? Because it feels good. Of course, I want that. I want more of that. And it creates this path, kind of like if you think over time, you get lazy, you don't follow the sidewalk to your car, or maybe parked on the road, you go through the grass, a couple of weeks, what happens? There's a path, right? I'm wearing it out because I've created this shortcut, this path to my car. And it's literally what's going on in your brain. There's this pathway, and it gets easier to take that pathway the more I walk it because it's there, right? It's easy. It's cut out for me. But if all of a sudden this spring I want some grass there, I got to quit walking that pathway, which might make me have to quit being lazy or whatever. It might be a little bit different. It might be a little bit odd. I go the long way. Eventually, maybe some grass will start growing up over that pathway again. It's still there. But I've created a new pathway. It's exactly what goes on in our brains, right? We create these pathways, and if I don't like the way my path is going, I have to change the pathway. I got to change the way I think. Your thoughts, the more you think a thought, the easier it is to think that thought again. In fact, if you think a thought enough, that thought becomes the default. That's your go-to now. It's just automatic. You have an automatic thought, gives you an automatic feeling, and before long, you just have automatic behaviors. You don't know why you're doing it anymore. It's because your brain's carved out a path for you over and over and over and over again. So if I'm developing a negative path, and like Paul, okay, I recognize it, and I want to take that thought captive, I have to stop and ask three really important questions. And you go research. There's a lot of different ways to challenge negative thinking. I found three that I think are the most simple. I teach people all the time, and I'd encourage you to put this in your vocabulary when you start thinking, that stinking thinking comes in. First question is ask, is it true? Then secondly, is it helpful? And then a third one that I've been using more recently is it mine? Because so many times I encounter people that have assumed anxiety from somebody else that's not even yours to worry about. You can't fix it, but we assume all of that. So that's how you take a thought captive, at least one way. And if the honest answer to any of these questions is no, it's not true, it's not helpful even if it is true, and even if it is true, it's not mine to worry about, I can't do anything about it. If the honest answer is no, then what do? I've got to choose a different path. I'm choosing a different path towards a different thought. I'm creating a new pathway. And here's what happens, okay? If you continue to travel the unhealthy path, the path is clear because it gets used a lot, and it's easier to travel that path. That's your go-to. It's automatic. If you choose to stay off the unhealthy path, though, right, what happens? Over time, it grows back, and your brain rewires around something differently. Does that make sense? I mean, your brain is working behind the scenes doing all of this. And so what we're trying to do is create positive pathways in our thinking. God created us miraculously to do that. New habits in our brains. Neurons. Somebody said neurons that fire together, wire together. I like the way that sounds. I mean, our thoughts have a way of just rewiring us. I like to say it like you grow what you feed. That makes a little more sense to me. And it's true. Think about this. In any area of your life, here's a good life principle. You grow what you feed, right? Bad habits, you keep feeding them, they're going to grow. Good habits, you keep feeding them, they're going to grow. For example, if you have a frustrating day at work and you come home and you're just expecting chaos everywhere, before you even get home, you're expecting chaos, so you automatically go into mode, whatever your mode is, to get ready for the chaos at home, right? And then the kids and your automatic response that you've been doing forever is just to yell at them. And so every day what happens, all right? You come home, you get all worked up before you can get in the door, and as soon as you do, you start yelling. You get angry. That's your go-to. You created a pathway that says, okay, where there's chaos, and if you're honest, you'll see this bleed into other areas of your life too. Where there's chaos, I get angry and I yell. Thought, feeling, behavior, right? It's what I've wired myself to do. I automatically do that. What we have to do is capture that thought, recognize it as it's happening, and ask why. Okay, why am I getting angry before I enter the door into my house? Why? Is what I'm angry even really worth about it? Like, is it true that this is the end of the world as we know it because my kids had a bad day? Is it worth me getting this upset about? Right? I mean, those aren't even my kids. This isn't even my house. Sometimes I find myself getting upset, right? I have to remind myself, is it true? I could just go home and chill. If your house is in chaos, yeah, it's true. My kids are like, yeah, they're crazy and they need to calm down. Well, is it helping you to go in and yell? Like, when's the last time you busted through the door and yelled at them and it fixed it? Because if it did, you wouldn't be worried about it tomorrow when you go home, right? Is it helpful? And then is it mine, you know? But if I stop and count to 10 before I go in, as I reckon, or maybe you need to stop and count to 500, 1,000, whatever works for you. If I can recognize the feeling as it's happening before I go into the house, it's stress-filled, but I hug my frazzled spouse, give her a hug, give him a hug, pat your little sweaty kids on the head, right? Let them yell a little bit. At first, it's really hard. It's awkward. I don't want to do that, but it's new. But you're creating a new pathway, a calming pathway, and you grow what you feed. The more you do that, right? For me, a lot of years, I've shared this with some of y'all, food was my pathway. And it still can be even nowadays, right? Because I go do something good, I reward myself with food, and it's not good. But for me, it triggers overwhelming. When I feel overwhelmed or I feel lonely, I've been able to see that a lot of times I will find myself standing at the open door refrigerator or walking into the pantry. And I'm not hungry, I'm just anxious. I'm just feeling what I'm feeling and trying to mask it. But over time, whenever my mind says I don't feel good about myself, so let's eat, there's a clear pathway. There's a very clear pathway between my anxious, lonely feelings and the refrigerator. And what I had to do is call it out, identify it. I don't feel good. Ice cream is the answer. Is that true? No. Is it helpful? No. I gotta capture that thought and say, no, actually, when I don't feel good about myself and then I eat more, it feels good for a little bit, but then I feel even worse after the fact because there I go again, and I've multiplied this unhealthy feeling about myself because I'm still lonely, I'm still anxious, and now I've added shame to the whole mix of these feelings. And so instead, I'm not going to travel that path. I'm going to identify it, choose to walk a new path. You know, well, I feel lonely and anxious. Maybe I go for a walk. Maybe I call somebody. Maybe I just tell somebody about it. I exercise, do something healthy, eat something healthy. And guess what? When I do something good about myself, I've taught myself I can do what I don't want to do. And that feels good too. And so all of a sudden, boop, I get this little reward of dopamine because I did something good. And you grow what you feed, right? And in time, that old pathway starts to grow over. You're not traveling it anymore. You're traveling a new pathway. That old pathway, I mean, it's still there if I choose it, but it's not as appealing anymore. I don't get the same reward. It's no longer the default. It's not my go-to. And so I've created a new positive way of thinking. Like your mind will tell you, I blew it. So I'm going to blow it. I always blow it, right? I'm never good enough at this. I screw everything up. Nothing ever goes my way. And you realize, you see how those things go to the extreme so easy? Never, always. I'm just always blah, 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 right? Is that true? Like, honestly, if you could step back and talk to yourself, that's a different issue. We'll talk about that a different week. But if you could, is that true? I mean, like, you've never, ever, ever done anything right in your life. You always screw, like everything, you screw everything up. You can't even comb your hair right. You couldn't get your toothbrush in your mouth right. Everything about you is totally wrong. Is that really true, or is this a bad moment? Maybe you screwed this up, but are you a screw up? Maybe you're in a dip. Maybe it's a bad season. Are you helping to solve anything by wallowing in it? Even if it is true. Yeah, you made a mistake. You goofed up. Learn from it. Is self-pity going to help? You say, I'm not going to travel down that anymore. I capture that thought. It's not healthy. It's not productive. It's not true. It's not helpful. So I'm going to choose a different path. What? I believe my God is with me. Even in my failures, in my weakness, he is strong. I believe that. I choose to believe that, right? I believe he's doing something new on the other side of this that maybe I can't see right now, but I'm choosing to trust him. And the more I tell myself that, the more it becomes true. Before long, that's my go-to. Here's what Paul told the Romans. He said, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world. And again, he's talking more about a mindset than just the things we do. Things we do come out of the mindset, right? Don't conform to their path. Don't think like they do. Don't live like the world lives. But let God transform you into a new person. How? Changing the way you live? No. That'll happen if what? How are we transformed? By changing the way you think. Change the way you think. Science would say you're rewiring your brain, right? God's word says you're renewing your mind. Then you'll learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. The outcome will be positive because you change the way you think. You grow at your feet. So my first piece of homework for you, and this is the biggest chunk of it, was to go home and identify it, call it out, name it. You can't change what you haven't been able to define. It's important. You think I'm not lovable, right? It's not worth it. It's too much effort. I always screw things up. I'll never be good enough. I don't deserve anything. I'm always going to be broke. I can get blah, blah, blah. Whatever it is, name it. Call it out. Don't be afraid to look it in the eye and call it. You can't heal what you can't feel. And you can't defeat what you can't define, so give it a name. This is a false belief, and the enemy uses it time and time again to beat you down and defeat. Name it. And then we're going to attack it. And here's the second thing we're going to do is I want you to tell the truth about it and then trust God with it. It's two things, but it's actually one, right? Tell the truth and trust God with it. Trust God with the truth. What's the truth? Okay, we're not going to travel the old, unhealthy, unhelpful, dishonest path. Instead, we're going to say it's not true. It's not helpful. It doesn't work. It's not even mine to be worried about right now. So here's the truth. Here's the path I want to follow. When I was thinking about this, we just went over to St. Louis for an overnighter this past weekend. And my niece has a dog. It's a Newfoundland, right? I always want to call it something else. Anybody ever seen one of these dogs, a Newfoundland dog? They're huge, like big beasts. If you saw one out you'd think it was a bear. It's just huge. I think hers is like 150 pounds, right? Big old joker. But it's so funny and sad maybe, but like they have it in the hallway and they don't want it to come into the main living areas of people because it's still kind of a puppy, I guess, or something. But to keep it in the hallway, it's like a foot high little gate thing. Was it even a gate? I don't even know what it was. It was something there that literally this dog could just step over it. And even if it was taller, I mean, this beast could just bust right through a door if it wanted to. But this dog will stand behind, it's pitiful, it'll stand behind this little 1 foot tall thing that it could easily get over and come see me if it wanted to. And it'll whine, and it'll dance a little bit, and it'll act all scared and stuff. And they're like, don't get too close or it'll piddle in the hallway too. So it's just this little fearful, big fearful thing being held back by something that in its mind, it believes it can't get past because there's hurt, there's harm, there's whatever. But is it true? No. This dog could easily get to me if it knew the truth. And that's where some of y'all are living. That's where I find myself living a lot of times. It's not true. The truth is, anybody ever heard the phrase security theater? It's something I just learned. We talk about church security a lot. A lot of times, it's really churches, businesses will use this practice sometimes of kind of creating a false security out of fake stuff, like a fake video camera. It's just a LED light. But it works because, a crook will go the easier route than the risky route. Like when we owned a home on the north side of town last year, the previous owners had a security system installed. We never really got it hooked back up, but we kept the sign in the front yard. Which I think back on, I don't know if that's honest or not, but I'm admitting it to you. So we kept it out there because we were just kind of told, a crook will go to your neighbors, and I don't know if that was good either. But, they're not going to take the risk if they think it's there. It works. It's fake, but like dummy deadlocks. That's a thing. You can go buy a dummy deadlock. Why? Because a lot of times that's all it takes. It'll work. If a crook can't tell the difference, a lot of times it's just as good as the real thing. Now, some of y'all are locked in a prison behind a 1-foot gate you could easily step over, or you're the only lock on the door that you're afraid to go through is a dummy lock. And you need to speak truth to it. You need to know the truth, identify the truth. There's a truth that will set you free, right? Look back at what Paul wrote again. Look at this all in context. This is a guy who struggled with this in his own mind. This is a guy who fought for emotional health. And he said, for though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does, not in our mind. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of this world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish. We just don't get over it. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. That's the truth. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. We tell that thought who it works for. We take it captive. And I love that phrase, to take captive. That's kind of how I define it. You work for me now. I don't work for you anymore. What we do is we capture the lie with the truth of God, and we declare it's not from God. This is not true. So I'm going to choose not to believe it. This is the truth that God says. I'll choose to embrace that. And we capture any wrong thought. I'm not going to go down this negative pathway anymore. I can see it for what it is. It's not helpful. I'm choosing a different road, and I'm watching. And the old path starts to grow over a little bit. I find myself not going to that as much anymore. It's not as appealing. It's not so easy. And the more I travel down the road of God's truth, I start to see that, hey, this is more than just preacher talk. This works. God made me this way. I like this. And it renews my mind. It rewards me for good stuff. And the more it changes my thinking, the more I'm able to walk by that, the more His Spirit guides me, the more His Word directs me, the more His power empowers me to do what I'm called to do. And all of a sudden, I'm living a pretty good life, and I'm happy. But your life is always moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts. That's why this is so important. What comes into your mind comes out in your life. So we capture that. What's held me hostage? I want you to lean into this truth, and I want to pray with you. I want you to take this with you. Just think about what Peter said about this. He said this in 2 Peter 1:3. He said, by His divine power, again, this isn't on me. By His divine power, God has given us everything we need for living a godly life. So there's a good everything always kind of an extreme. God's given me everything I need. Now, some of y'all want to push back against that, right? No, I don't have everything I need. I'm not enough. I'm not adequate. But God's given us everything we need for living a godly life. What's a godly life? That's a satisfying life. That's a full life. That's a bigger life. We've received all of this by coming to know Him, the one who called us to Himself by means of His marvelous glory and excellence. I have everything I need. So when my inner bully wants to tell me I'm not enough, I may not be enough to hit my goal right now, but I'm enough to do everything God expects of me today. The more God's pathway, I think it's me. I had a problem with the mic first service, and I chose a different pathway, so I'm going to have to choose another one. But the more I walk in this, the more God's path becomes, the easier it is for me to travel, right? It's a training. It's a new habit. Some of y'all want to say you're not disciplined, and that's not true either. You are disciplined. You just have some bad disciplines. You need some new disciplines. And it doesn't feel natural at first, right? No, when I'm weak, He makes me strong, right? And I don't know what this could be for you, but, I'm not attractive. I'm not good enough. No, I'm fearfully, wonderfully made. I'm made just right. I'm made exactly right for what God wants me to do. That's where I'm going to find my happiness. That's where I'm not going to be a victim. I can overcome, right? Your life is moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts. And so the next couple of weeks, we're going to get practical about how we do with this. So I really want you to come back and follow this with me. Bring somebody with you as we talk more about this. But this morning, I just want you to go out of here knowing you have a choice, okay? You don't have to be the victim to these negative thoughts. There's a reason they're there, but you have a choice to challenge them. You have a choice of what you're going to take ownership of. And through God's help, through God's strength, you can change the way you view your life. You can change the way that you naturally go towards things. You don't have to stay locked in a prison when Jesus has opened the door, and He has. And the truth will set you free. So just pray with me. Father, I thank You this morning that You have made a way. And so, God, I just pray this morning You do some free setting. God, set us free with Your truth. And wherever that lands for each of us, I just pray You'd speak individually to each of our hearts to help us to know what is the truth that we need to speak back to the lies that have kept us held back. Help us to have a hunger to know that, to be courageous enough to name it, to call it, to look it in the eye. And God, I know for many of us, that's a really hard first step, a difficult step maybe we've been fighting for a lot of years, just to be honest with ourselves, honest with our own feelings. God, but I just pray that you would help us to have a healthy desire to do that. And not just for ourselves, but God, for the bigger story that you've put inside of all of us. Help us to recognize it, to speak truth to it, and then to trust you with it, God, to trust you to take us down a different road. And I know this can take time, but God, help us to walk in your truth and honor you with the life that we live. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.